On April the 5th, 1956, Labour journalist Victor Riesel was leaving the famous Lindy's restaurant on Broadway when a hired thug approached and threw acid in his face. It was an attack masterminded by Lucchese family powerhouse Johnny Dio and left Riesel blind in both eyes for the rest of his life. So, what was the reason that led Johnny Dio to orchestrate such a vicious attack on the famed journalist? Let's check it out. Welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Today, we're going to take a look at Johnny Dio, the fearsome Labour racketeer for the Lucchese crime family, and check out his involvement in the famous acid attack on journalist Victor Riesel. Giovanni Johnny Dio Dioguardi was born into the mob. In 1930, when Dio was 16, his father, Giovanni, a bicycle store owner, was killed in what authorities claim was a mob-related hit. Johnny Dio's uncle was the respected Lucchese family captain James Jimmy Doyle Plumeri, although at the time it was known as the Gagliano family. Dio and his two brothers Thomas and Frank would all eventually join the Lucchese crime family, along with their cousin Thomas Tommy Flowers Plumeri. Dioguardi grew up in the mob-heavy territory of the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and after his father's death, Dio went to work in the crew of his uncle Jimmy Doyle. Jimmy Doyle was involved in labour racketeering in the garment industry, a sector that was dominated by then Gagliano family underboss Tommy Lucchese and Jewish mobster Louis Lepke Buchalter. Johnny Dio learned his mob trade initially as a labour slugger, but he quickly showed his intelligence and his understanding of the politics of labour unions. Johnny Dio was a rising star in the Gagliano family, and despite a 3 to 5 year stretch for conspiracy in 1937, he became a made man at around the age of 40. By this time, the family boss was now the shrewd and formidable Tommy Lucchese. Dio quickly became a favourite of Lucchese's, and along with another mafia prodigy, Antonio "Tony Ducks" Corallo, the pair were tasked with handling labour racketeering. A racket that was close to Tommy Lucchese's heart and was a huge earner for the family. In the early 1950s, Paul "Red" Dorfman, president of the Waste Handlers Union, introduced Dioguardi and Corallo to Jimmy Hoffa. Hoffa was campaigning to replace Dave Beck as the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. In 1955, Dio and Corallo chartered 7 paper Teamster locals, essentially phony organisations that helped Hoffa win the Teamster presidency. And so, by 1956, Johnny Dio was one of the most powerful labour racketeers in the country, and was seen by many as the natural heir to Tommy Lucchese, even ahead of future boss Antonio "Tony Ducks" Corallo. And this is where we meet journalist Victor Riesel. Riesel was born in 1913, a year before Dioguardi, and he also grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He embarked on a career in journalism in 1937 when he started writing a column on labour unions. He became a very vocal anti-union corruption crusader, and in 1952 he butted heads with Albert Anastasia's brother, Tough Tony Anastasio, accusing him of labour racketeering. By the mid-1950s, Riesel's column was in 193 newspapers nationally. In April of 1956, Riesel was due to testify in front of the Federal Special Rackets Grand Jury. They were investigating the infiltration of gangsters into American labour unions. It is alleged that it was this upcoming testimony that put him in the crosshairs of the dangerous Johnny Dio. On the 2nd of April 1956, an associate of Johnny Dio called Charles Tuso entered a candy store in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, owned by a former burglar called Gondolfo Moranti. Moranti would later tell the FBI that Tuso asked me if I wanted to make $1,000 to throw acid at somebody. Tuso didn't tell Moranti who it was, and Moranti told him that he would think about it. After Tuso had left, Dominic Bando, an old neighbourhood friend, stopped by the candy store, and Moranti offered him $500 to do the job. Moranti later claimed to the FBI that he and Bando still had no idea at this point who the target was. In another FBI statement, local hoodlum Joseph Carlino told the FBI that Bando had approached him and asked if he knew anyone who wanted a contract for beating someone. Carlino then spotted Abraham Abe Telfi, and he told Bando, "There's a crazy kid who's hungrier than I am." Abe Telfi was told that he had to throw a few punches and put a guy out of commission for 10 days. On the night of the 2nd of April, Johnny Dio himself stopped by Morandi's candy store. His appearance impressed the 7 or 8 guys who were playing cards with Morandi. Morandi then confirmed to Dio that he was indeed interested in the deal, and Dio then slipped him $50. Dio then told Morandi to wait for a man called Skinny. Skinny appeared around midnight and handed Morandi a paper bag with a brown bottle of acid inside. Joe Carlino later told the FBI that Abe Telfi told him that when Morandi handed him the bottle of sulfuric acid, he'd said, "Throwing acid was better than throwing punches at a guy. It's faster and you just throw it and run." And so on the 5th of April at around 3 a.m, Victor Riesel left Lindy's restaurant with his assistant Betty Nevins, and they started to approach Nevins' car. Abe Telfi was hiding in the shadows nearby. Accounts vary as to what exactly happened next, with some reports saying that Telfi shouted out Riesel's name, and others saying that he asked Riesel for the time. What is known is that Telfi then threw the acid into the journalist's face. However, not all the acid came out of the bottle, and when Telfi pulled his arm back to throw again, some of the acid splashed out onto his own face and clothes. Riesel suffered horrific injuries to his face, with the sulfuric acid burning deep into his eyes. The following morning, Johnny Dio met with Morandi to congratulate him and hand him $500 to give to Telfi. Telfi was also given an additional $100 to replace his acid-damaged clothes. And he was allegedly promised more money down the line and the potential ownership of a bar. However, there was no further money coming for Telfi, and he started causing problems for Johnny Dio and his other conspirators. Telfi was demanding compensation for the injuries that he sustained during the attack, with his face covered in nasty burns. Telfi was given a further $500, but he still wanted more, and allegedly he'd started walking around the area like some kind of tough guy. In the summer of that year, Dioguardi eventually agreed to give Telfi some more money. However, on July the 26th, Telfi received Johnny Dio's own brand of compensation when he was shot in the head in public on Mulberry Street. By the time the feds were able to connect Telfi to the killing in August 1956, it was too late. But they were able to bring charges against Morandi, Carlino, Tuso, Bando, and Johnny and Thomas Dio for conspiring to obstruct justice. Morandi and Carlino made statements to the FBI which implicated their fellow conspirators, but at a later date, unsurprisingly, recanted their statements, and all charges against Johnny Dio were dropped. Morandi and Bando were given prison terms, and Carlino received a suspended sentence. The public and shocking nature of the attack helped galvanise the public against organised crime. Robert Kennedy, who at the time was on the warpath against the mob, told his wife Ethel that he feared that gangsters might throw acid in the faces of his children. Riesel was permanently blinded from the attack, but continued writing his column, and he never backed down in his fight against organised crime. He eventually became the Labour advisor to President Nixon in the 1970s. He retired in 1990, and he died in 1995, aged 81. The next 14 years of Dio's life would be dogged by legal problems. However, he still managed to amass a fortune for the Lucchese family through extortion and stocks and bankruptcy fraud schemes. He remained relatively free through this period until 1970. The 56-year-old received 5 years for bankruptcy fraud and was sent to Lewisburg prison. While inside, the authorities kept hitting Dioguardi with additional charges, including a 40-count indictment for stock fraud, which landed Dio an additional 30 years. He spent the rest of his life inside Lewisburg. Dogged by ill health through the decade, he died in 1979 after being transferred to a local hospital. Had it not been for his legal problems and high profile, it is definitely thought that he was a strong contender to succeed family boss Tommy Lucchese. A very small portrayal of Dio appears in Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. Can anyone remember his character's classic line? Please comment below. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.